Mike and I are doing this new video, and little unique. You know, there's two things they say you should never talk about is religion and politics. We're going to talk some politics. Just because, you know, we've known each other a long time. And I think we did one video on Obama once, like way back in 2008. Still remember this, because you were visiting me, remember, during that election when I lived in Nassau. And actually, we have a vivid memory. We have a guy dancing in front of a TV.
Yeah, I remember that.
It was like a local African American or African Bohemian guy, like dancing in front of a TV, because, you know, there's an African American president elected, etc. And it was kind of funny because it's a bar and everyone's getting drunk, right? But it was pretty funny to see. You know, just you had to see it. It was like a big party. But now we have this election, which I didn't really. I don't know. Even that first Obama, I look at. I've lived in the Bahamas since 2005, and by doing that, I essentially don't vote in Canadian elections anymore because I'm from Canada. I'm just a resident here or a homeowner here. I don't participate in the local politics. So I really haven't voted for a number of years, and I really don't care. I don't really miss it at all, to be honest. But I do find this election to be really interesting for a lot of reasons. Like I was telling Mike one time that I couldn't even remember these results of the primaries when Romney was running in 2012. But now I'm really following it, and I find it very interesting. And obviously, I got interested when Trump got involved. Like, I watched the first debate back in August, where he said that, you know, they asked him if he was calling women fat slobs and pigs and all this sort of thing, and he said only Rosie O'Donnell. And I almost like fell to the floor laughing, and I was like, this is great. Like, this is going to be, in terms of, you know, well, I don't know, Rosie O'Donnell is kind of a fat slob, but, you know, it was not more of that. It was more, this is going to be entertaining, this is going to be funny, this is not going to be politically correct, this is not going to be the same old politics. So, I don't know, Michael, what do you think of it in terms of, I'll tell you my opinion after you speak, and it's not so much that I agree with Trump's positions, but I understand why this is happening.
Well, I just looked on my phone to see what the date is. It's March the 22nd. We have two primaries today, and that first debate...
Arizona and Utah.
Yeah, Arizona, Utah is today. And that debate that you're talking about was the first debate with Trump, and everyone thought he was just going to fizzle out and amount to nothing, and here we are, where he's leading, you know, with the most delegates, and, you know, he should be nominated unless they do something and take it away from him.
My
so
feeling
that alone
is
is pretty shocking.
My feeling is actually I've looked at the states, and because I said I'm following it a little closer than I usually do, and he'll lose in Utah by the look of it pretty handily, but he's going to win Arizona, which is, you know, a winner-take-all state too, which is important. But I look at the states that are left, like all of the West Coast states, like, you know, Oregon, Washington, California. In my opinion, they're going to all go to Trump. You know, I don't see them going to Cruz. And then the Northeast states, Cruz has absolutely zero shot in. So I actually look at it like Trump, I think people are underestimating. He only's going to win like 54% of the seats of the seats, the voters left. I could actually see him doing it, especially when it's split three ways, and, you know, you get a disproportionate amount, meaning that if you win 40% in a certain state, you're probably getting 50, 60, 70% of the delegates. So I still think there's a good chance that he gets the majority, and even if he doesn't, he's going to be short by 100. And there's going to be 100 people who voted for someone else. They're going to say, "Hey, we're just moving over to him because we don't need a contested, conference and all this sort of thing." You know, so that's my opinion. So, but what do you actually think about what's going on, like in the country, like the movement, like why people supporting Trump?
Well, they're supporting him because people are fed up. Because
this is my opinion.
The people, the conservative people, well, both parties in a certain sense. So on the liberals' side or the Democrats, even though Hillary Clinton is on the path to get nominated, and it seems pretty obvious she will get nominated, you have had this Sanders character who's come up and has gotten a lot of support. Even if Clinton wins, he still has done better than anyone would have thought was possible. Who would have dreamt 4 years ago that a guy that says he's a socialist self-proclaimed socialist, almost a Marxist-Leninist, would get 40% or something of the Democratic primary votes. So that's a sign that there are people that don't care about Clinton. They don't want the Clinton machine. Who believes the Clinton machine is going to make your life better? But then the same problem happened with the Republicans. Who really believes that Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio or any of these characters is going to do anything to help you? They're not. The last Republican administration was very, it was a bad time, They did not keep us safe. 9/11 happened when Bush was president, as Trump has pointed out. And that's actually the most interesting, one of the more interesting things is the whole Fox News Republican story that you see them put out is Bush is a great leader, Bush kept us safe, Obama is weak, Obama does these healthcare things, but Bush is good, we need strong Bush, or, so forth. And what was funny is Trump denounced Bush, both the Jeb and the George, and I guess the father. It said they didn't keep us safe. 9/11 happened when Bush was president, and what was Bush doing on 9/11? Well, if you actually go look into it,
he was just speaking at a school, wasn't he?
Well, yeah, he was speaking at a school, and he got on an Air Force One.
Yeah.
And Cheney said, "We don't need you. Fly for your own safety. Fly to this Air Force base," and they turned his radio off. So he made no decisions.
And I think even before they landed, they flew around.
Yeah, that's what they did.
Yeah.
They turned his radio off and flew around the country, and he did absolutely nothing. So, but what's interesting about it though is that was the myth they had built up, and Trump just smashed it in a debate, and just the whole thing got deflated. And this happened in South Carolina, and I think, 6 months ago or whatever, Jeb Bush probably assumed I got the military support, because of all this stuff, and then the military people in South Carolina, the veterans or the people in the service, because there's a lot of bases down there, they voted all for Trump. So that myth just kind of got punched. But it's really the economy and just malaise, and just people want something different, and they don't think.
Well, here's my opinion.
People are helping them.
And I'll equate it to the economy, which is really interesting. And this is not a partisan argument. Is that, my opinion is it's not as extreme, but in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. I think 2008 for the Western world was like the 1991 was to communism, and that this whole bubble, what George Soros called, regardless of what you think of his politics, but Soros called it the super bubble, where all this money around the world was funding U.S. deficits, trade deficits, current account deficits, people borrowing to buy houses they couldn't afford. Because why? Americans are the richest people in the world, and they'd go buy Chinese stuff and Japanese stuff and Asian stuff and whatever. Even Europeans, they go buy German cars, whatever, right? Italian cars, all these sorts of things. So people would fund it. But that system, and then that spread around the world to this big credit bubble everywhere, and that whole system then collapsed, right? But in the 90s, what happened after the Soviet Union collapsed, Yeltsin rushed to privatize everything because he didn't want the country going back to communism. But the problem was it was so rushed. There were a few ex-KGB guys, and I'm not even talking about Putin. I'm talking about these other guys, or a lot of the guys who were already running the industries and who were high up in the Communist Party. They got all of these contracts. I think they sold the main Russian state media company for $4 or $5 million. It was probably worth 50 times that much, right? So then all these oligarchs got all these assets for free, and then when the country began to recover in the 90s, they had stock markets and prices were going higher, but the wealth was really all going to these oligarchs. So in 1998, they had a crash from that, and out of that crash came Putin, who basically, and regardless of what you think of Putin, one thing that he did that you can't argue with as a negative is that he took the boots to all those oligarchs. He basically said, you're all stealing from the country, you all artificially got this wealth through your connections, and you're out of here. And that was and the reason that people gravitated to Putin is because they knew it. They were like, yeah, these people stole from us, and they all became rich, and we got to get rid of them, okay? So then what happened now is that we had this crash, and instead of like Roosevelt, and again, I don't agree with all the New Deal and all these sorts of things, but what Roosevelt did is at least he threw all the crooks into jail. And he took all the power away from these Wall Street guys who screwed everybody over before and after the great crash. But what happened this time is they did quantitative easing. They bailed out the banks. They did a stimulus. And all that money for Obama, seeing he's some so-called liberal, he was the best thing that ever happened to Wall Street, or these one percenters or billionaires, or whatever you want to call them. So what's happened now in the U.S. is kind of like this reaction where when these people get essentially ripped off or stolen from, and they may not be sophisticated enough to know that this quantitative easing and this money all flowed to the top, but when it happens, they know something's wrong. And usually you get a guy with a real strong personality and a real strong man that's saying that, hey, no, like whatever, these trade deals are bad, or this is bad, or that is bad. But really what it pertains to is all this money flowed to the top. And Trump had never even invested in the stock market, by the way, till 2011. Which, by the way, is interesting in itself, because that tells you how the cheap money inflated the market. Because a guy like Trump, who had kind of shunned stocks his whole life, decided, I'm going to buy it because there's nowhere else to put my money.
Yeah.
Right? And he had the money to do it. So anyhow, that to me, that's the reaction, in that you had the big collapse in '08, like Russia in 91, and then you had this reaction which really benefited the few really, really rich people, right? And now people are reacting against that. And then you also have this kind of Orwellian society myth thing going on where the government tells you the unemployment is 4.9, and you know it's, excuse my language, we know it's bullshit. Right, and they tell you the wages are going higher, and you know that's nonsense. It's like in 1984, the chocolate ration has been increased, and it's really been decreased. Right? People know that this is not the truth. Yeah. And Obama, actually, he's gone up in TV. And by the way, I could care less about Obama. I'm not one of these guys always rants against Obama. I could care less about this guy. But he gets up on TV and he says, "Oh, it's hard for these doom and gloomers to say our economy's bad. The unemployment rate's 4.9%." And he's feeding into the Orwellian myth. And it's like, why is Bernie Sanders getting 40% of Democratic votes? Why is Donald Trump getting 40% of Republican votes? And really, even though Sanders is more of a socialist, and he has got an ism, Trump is more of just a populist, right? Why are these guys that are both essentially populists in the end getting so much? It's because people, regardless if they know why or what has happened, they're just fed up.
Yeah, that's right. And they are targeting people. Like Sanders is targeting the 1%, and Trump is targeting the politicians. So they are telling people these are the people that are the cause of it, and in both senses, both those targets are responsible, in one way or the other.
Sanders is a socialist, and I disagree with almost everything he believes in, but the funny thing is when he talks about the banks and breaking up the banks and this and that and all the stuff he believes in, I actually agree with what he's saying 100% on that thing, because the banks are too big to fail. They do need to be broken up. And that's around the world, by the way. The Deutsche Bank in Germany is too big. Credit Suisse is too big. The biggest Santander in Spain is too big. And that goes around the world. That what you need is, like, I'm from Canada. Canada only has about 5 or 6 big banks. But the Canadian banks, to me, if you go look at the actual size of them, they're a good size in that they're not too crazy and big to take everything down, but they're big enough to absorb losses or something in a downturn. So I think you need these banks to all be about that size all over the world. And who cares? It means you have 50 banks in a country instead of 10, right, like in the United States. But it would be the right thing to do. But anyway, we don't get to that. But it's just basically, these are just populist, really, movements in the end. That I don't even think a lot of the people voting for Sanders are socialists. They just want something different. Yeah. And I don't think a lot of the people, like personally, if I was American and, I'm more of a libertarian, but if I had to vote between Hillary and Trump, I'm going to vote for Trump just because I'd be fed up myself, right? So, and I think like a lot of libertarians are voting for Trump just because he's anti the establishment, And like, for example, you look at the media. I personally think the reason the media hates him is not just because he's politically incorrect and he says these things, is because he's only spent, we were looking at the numbers the other day, he's only spent $27 million. A lot of these guys like Rick Santorum, who couldn't even get 1% of the vote, spent more money than him on their campaign. And these guys are out in November or December, right? And it's like he's using social media. But here's why I think they hate him is that Romney supposedly spent $1 billion. Can you believe that? $1 billion on his campaign. Imagine what $1 billion could do. How many people that could feed, how many houses that could build, or charities you could, whatever, right? How many things you could do with it, right? And I think Obama spent about $800 million. So they're saying Trump, who probably has about $400 million in liquid assets, doesn't have the money to spend it himself. He needs donors. But what I keep telling people, what it really is, where does that $1 billion go? It goes to websites for advertising. It goes to ABC, NBC, CBS. And they know with Trump, he's going to use these different tools. He's just going to get up on TV and speak, and they're going to show it, and it's free advertising. They know that he's going to do his...
And his speeches are more effective than the Jeb Bush ads or the Hillary ads.
Because they're entertaining.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then then he's also going to do his tweets. He's going to use Facebook. He's going to use social media. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump can get his whole presidential campaign done for $250 million for a quarter of what Romney had done. So that I think is why the media is against him, because they're not getting their advertising dollars with him. That's my own personal. That's something no one ever talks about, but I really think that
it makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense, Because like you were saying, when they had the primary in Virginia, you never saw one Trump commercial, and you won the damn state.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a landslide too. So, I don't know. It's gonna be crazy, but it'll be interesting to see what happens in July.
But anyhow,
the Republican Party.
The last point.
Yeah.
Define. We've talked about this. I think what it really is in the end, we're talking about this backlash. It's just the breakdown of these Western systems.
Yeah.
That makes it kind of.
Well, Trump stuff isn't just happening in the United States. In Europe, they've had
you got far right-wing parties.
Right.
Won a whole bunch of local elections in Germany. England might, or Great Britain might separate from the EU. You have Nazis in Greece, and a far left party took hold there. And it's just like what's happened is after this bubble imploded, it's just like these systems are basically these social welfare, socialistic kind of economy systems, which in my opinion are unsustainable because of all the outlays the government has to pay. It's starting just to implode on itself and break down and all that sort of thing. So, and there's other factors too with immigration in Europe and whatnot. But anyhow, it's just really this system kind of, imploding on itself. Because let's face it, I think in 2000 everything was booming. Trump wouldn't even been.
No, he wouldn't have a chance.
He wouldn't have a chance. Everyone was happy. The .coms were booming. They're all making money.
And the simple solution, you can't control these things. If Sanders scares you or Trump scares you or you're just scared, just buy gold and get a gun and you'll be safe. That's all you have to do. So, I don't worry about it. It's more entertaining than anything else at this point.
And canned food.
Yeah, you better have and rice and so forth.
So buy some gold stocks.
Yeah, that's right.
Buy Campbell's soup.
That's right. A lot of it. And there you are. So anyway, you're interested in we'll
see what happens.
Yeah.
At the very least, it's entertaining. Yeah.